Coming up today on Uncommon Sense, join us as we interview Father Ryan Adorjan, the parochial vicar at Saints Peter and Paul in Naperville, and the former headmaster of the Chesterton Academy of the Holy Family. Hello, and welcome to Uncommon Sense, the official podcast of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. I am Grettelyn Darkey, your host, and joined as usual by our VP of Evangelization, Joe Grabowski. Hi, Joe. How are you?
Very good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. And as I said, we are pleased to be joined today by Father Ryan Adorjan, a friend of the Chesterton Academies and one-time headmaster. And we are just going to talk today about lots of interesting things, I hope.
Us too.
Yeah, in part because Chesterton Academies sort of spawn that kind of thing. So, Father, if you wouldn't mind, some of our listeners may have heard you on here before, but if you wouldn't mind just giving a brief introduction to yourself for their benefit.
Sure. Yeah, it's good to be back with you guys. And as we said earlier, first time with Joe. So look forward to just being on with you guys. And hello to everyone. Yeah, I was on for one of the last headmaster spotlights, I think, last school year sometime. And in that time, I've been back in the parish now, which has been amazing. A huge parish in the Chicago suburbs. So we have 5 priests here in this place, which is just a great blessing. And I don't know, it's a beautiful time of priestly fraternity and just kind of in a bustling parish, big school. I've been a priest for 5 years, 5.5 years, I guess. It'll be 6 years in May. And in that time, I've done so many different ministries, parish life, of course, in big parishes, small parishes. I did Black Catholic ministry for a while. Then I was at Chesterton Academy of the Holy Family here in Lisle for 3 years. And I was teacher, chaplain, and then headmaster eventually. And now looking forward to, just going back to the diocesan life and seeing, hopefully, maybe a pastorate in the future. But for now, I'm still teaching at Mundelein Seminary for their lay leadership program. So I'm teaching moral theology up there. So a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and all the things that make life fun and kind of zesty, as we say. So I'm happy to be back with you guys.
That's great to have you. I guess just so what can you take from your Chesterton Academy experience that you're taking into your current priestly duties now?
Well, it's something that I think before I was at Chesterton, I kind of intuited and was something that needed to be there. But after Chesterton, there's no really after Chesterton, right? You can't do that. Now in this way of interacting with, especially the person of Chesterton, and his passion for evangelization, and especially his passion for evangelization as a layman, is so, I think, critical for the world today. It's in terms of parish life and the ways that parishes kind of take a look at what their ministries are and what their ministries need to be going forward. We know that Vatican II, everyone thinks, the real hallmark of Vatican II was the liturgy stuff, but that's kind of boring in comparison with the actual revolution of Vatican II, which was the universal call to holiness and the kind of the place of the laity and the apostolic mission of the church. And so that's something that G.K. Chesterton, even before Vatican II, was intuiting and picking up on and running full speed with. And so I think just being able to see, we talk about empowering the laity, and then we get into these crazy conversations about things that we don't need to talk about, right? Like the priest. We're not going to talk about the priesthood. We're not talking about any of that. But just that what you're doing in your daily life is how the Lord is inviting you to be His witness in the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like some special thing, like certain of you are required and certain of you, no, wherever you are, however you find yourself living life. And that's why I think G.K. Chesterton, the person, is so inspiring for people, is because they read especially when you read his kind of collections of like newspaper articles or different letters to people, you see that he was someone who was like sitting at his desk spouting truth,
Mm.
and often in a very pointed but charitable and funny way,
Mm.
So I would say that is kind of one of the biggest things that I have on my mind a lot now that I'm back in the parish. But the other side of it too is just as I saw, I mean, you guys are probably familiar with the classic, like the freshmen come to Chesterton and they all say, we don't want to be here. We want to go to the big high school. We want to do this. And then by the time they're giving their gala speeches, it's 4 years later, they're so grateful for their time at Chesterton and they can't imagine having been anywhere else, right? And we used to make fun of that in a kind of, you know, tongue-in-cheek way, because it was like every gala speech that was submitted was that same plot line. But I do think that there's something really beautiful about that transformation, and that so many people, because I think when we talk about the great books, and why are you studying Latin? Why are you studying philosophy? Oftentimes that's the parents' reaction, that's people in the parish's reaction, that's the kids' reaction. Why are we doing this? I don't want to do this. I want to go to this college prep place or whatever. But then, having been transformed for years by the great writers, by the tradition, by
Mm.
a broader worldview, then not only is their thinking transformed, but as Paul would say, their whole life is transformed by a renewal of their mind.
Mm.
So that's the second takeaway that I would love to figure out a way to bring more actively into parish life is, how can we expose more people to the great books, to art, to beauty, and to have real informed discussions on these things. And I'm constantly thinking of those lines from Deuteronomy, where the Lord is saying, like, this is not too high for you. This is not too
Mm.
far away from you. This is not too
Mhm.
lofty for you. It's written in you. It's
Mm.
it's accessible to you. It's
Mm.
totally available to you. And I think of
Beautiful.
that always, right? Like, I don't know how to read half these things, but you have a teacher that does, and
Mm.
they sit with you and walk with you, and all of a sudden a new world opens up before you. And so when I preach about, I use the great books when I preach, or when I give talks and I use them, or I mean, I know I'm in good company when I say that I'm just like a big nerdy person, and um, I get excited talking about these things, and
Mm.
people see, wow, like there's life coming from these things that I thought were just part of a dead tradition. So maybe
Mm.
there's something for me to explore there
Mm.
and find a real renewal in their own Christian faith, as G.K. Chesterton did.
Mm.
I think those are, I think, untapped opportunities for parish life now.
Oh, there's a lot there. Just wanted to kind of add though that one way that I'm seeing that in my own area, there's sort of this renewal of pastors just choosing to buy like really good art for their churches.
Yeah.
We just got like a 4-foot icon of Saint Michael,
No way.
and like the church is a spaceship church, right? But then they put this Saint Michael in there, and it's my son is 5, and he's like, "Look, Saint Michael," and it's so cool. He's spearing the dragon. Um, but yeah,
That's awesome.
But I've noticed it in a couple different places. There's a huge Sacred Heart they put in one church I sang a wedding in recently. It's just this growing trend of like bringing the beauty back into the churches, even if the churches aren't that beautiful.
Yeah.
But it's opening that door in a way for people to be raised up into this higher level. And lay people are paying for this, so it's pretty neat. It's someone's donating for this specifically, and it's a hopeful trend, I think.
And they want that.
Mm-hmm.
They want that. And sounds so pretentious and clerical. Sorry, but they want that, even though they don't know that they want that.
Mm.
And I think that is seen all over the place. And my classmates, guys my age, who are being made pastors, are coming into places that are the spaceship churches, or they are Our Lady of the Thunderdome or whatever. And they're encountering a lot of resistance at first, but I'm really proud. I don't know. I'm just very proud of the seminary formation that we received in particular,
Mm.
and the ways that my brother priests are out there in their parishes doing this. These younger guys who are I think confounding a lot of people, because I think on the whole, my generation of priests is a more conservative generation of priests. I don't like
Mm-hmm.
that divide really, but they're definitely seen that way. And then that's associated with, oh, so they're going to be kind of grumbly and they're going to be unavailable or whatever. But then here you have these guys who are filling their churches with color and life and art. And it's fun to watch people kind of come around after a while, and to see the transformations. My parish here in Naperville, St. Peter and Paul, the church is 100 years old. The parish just celebrated 175 years a couple of years ago. And I mean, it's one of these churches that's like, you go into it and you're sort of like, how did this place get away from the 70s and 80s, you know?
Yeah.
And there were plans, honestly, but to change it and redo it. But they wanted to take the communion rail out. And there was a man who had given a lot of money to the parish, and he went in the day they were taking it out and he sat on it. And he said, I'm not giving you any more money if you take this thing out. And so whatever they had taken out, they put back, you know. But the communion rail gates, we just learned that a long time ago they were just put into the dumpster, thrown away, and that some neighbors dumpster dove and took them out. And now they're in their house and they refuse to give them back. Now we're kind of going through that. It's just interesting, though, and you know, beautiful stained glass windows, these German stained glass windows, and interesting when people come here, they say, you know, when I'm here, I really feel like I'm at church. What does that mean, though? You know, I feel like I'm at church. Well, it means that the architecture is doing what it's supposed to do, right? That you feel like you're not on earth anymore. You know, you feel like you've encountered the house of God and gate of heaven, which is what church architecture is supposed to be. And so even people who aren't schooled and maybe they can't write you like a doctoral dissertation on the importance of sacred architecture, they're able to turn and say, yet I am moved by something that I can't put my finger on, maybe. Oh, it's the windows. Oh, it's well, it's everything put together is what it is. And it's beautiful to see that transformation happen in people's lives. And for me, especially, the parish is right across the street from a college, a small college called North Central College, which is where I went to college. And so I had my own conversion in this same church, you know, and now I've lived here for 3 years, and to be able to just see that in other people and to help other people with that. I mean, it's just so beautiful to see the way that the Lord works and uses difficulty for us as blessings for others, and vice versa.
Beautiful.
Yeah, if I may go back just to something you said earlier, just about the what people want maybe but don't know that they want, and tying into the idea of what Chesterton brings at all levels, especially to the experience of the laity. I was reminded of a quote of his. It's from an unlikely source. It's just one of the random essays in the Illustrated London News, which just goes to show that, you know, Chesterton, his profundity is not limited to the major works, right? Just in a literary essay for a newspaper, he comes up with something like this. But the quotation is, the one thing that is never taught by any chance in the atmosphere of the public schools is that there is a whole truth of things, and that in knowing it and speaking it, we are happy. And that whole truth of things, I think, you know, that's the Chestertonian difference, and it applies at the level of schools, certainly, and at the level of education and intellectual formation, to kind of, you know, see the totality of truth, see the way that different disciplines and subject areas intertwine with one another. But from a spiritual and human formation perspective, it's simply about cultivating this sense of how God, in kind of what's sometimes called the first gospel, which is just nature, and then, you know, obviously in a supernatural revelation, he's always speaking to us. He's always speaking to us, but we need to willingly tune into that, and especially in this day and age when there's so much else to tune into.
Yeah.
So cultivating that attention and cultivating that interest and desire is so important. And this relates, really through the entire course of the Christian life, but even down to those things that we've been discussing here. I often talk to friends about, church design, church appointments, architecture, things like that. And some of them, depending on their formation, will say, the quintessential line, well, you can't debate matters of taste. And I think there is certainly a bit of a truth there, but the problem with that is that it skips over the question of, well, is taste something like conscience that can be ill or poorly formed
Yeah.
or well formed, right? And it's true in a certain way that just like an errant conscience is to be obeyed, you can't really argue somebody out of a cultivated poor taste. You need to go back to the primary kind of muscle there and retrain that to appreciate what ought to be appreciated as opposed to what ought not. And I think that's just something Chesterton is an exemplary model of.
Yeah. I think there's a an ability to introduce people to good taste. That again, it's like they don't know what they want until they've tried it. I did not grow up eating very high quality, lovely food. I just didn't. It just wasn't part of my life tradition. But my husband is a bit of a foodie, and I have, since I married him, like discovered some very wonderful things that I didn't know I would like. And I think some people can respond to that, and food is something that's not very confrontational, right? It's like not as people don't get as tied up in knots about that, but it is similar with things like architecture and music and art. Sometimes, if you're fed on a constant diet of, the top 40 or whatever, and then suddenly you hear Palestrina for the first time, like it might seem a little strange, but it might move you in a way that you don't understand, and you wouldn't have understood. You'd never even encounter it if somebody didn't introduce you, probably. So it is important to have that introduction that
Yeah.
is offered.
I never thought about the connection between conscience and taste before, and I definitely think there's some kind of connection there.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot. I want to think about that some more because I think that's definitely true. And do you guys remember when I don't know if it was always known or just kind of came out in a big way that Lizzo plays the flute? You remember
Yeah.
that? And Lizzo, like
Yes.
her music is just like, I'm not so, for me, no thanks. But I know people that love her. Fine. But when she kind of capitalized, I think, a little bit on being a classically trained flautist,
Mm.
um, that led so many people to say, wow, like what is classical music,
Mm.
and that witness of Lizzo made the whole thing a bit more classical music feel more accessible to people who felt like, oh, that's hoity-toity music or whatever. But
Mm.
then, how many, when you really read the stories of famous musicians, how many of them are all classically trained,
Mm-hmm.
and they're
Yeah.
able to do what they can do with music because they are classically trained.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
do you guys ever hear? Go ahead. Sorry.
You get the rock guitarists who are influenced by Bach. So many of them are influenced by Bach.
Yeah, it's
It's amazing.
fascinating to
Yeah.
me. Yeah, it's fascinating to me. Do you guys know who Jacob Collier is? Have you ever heard of him? He's a musician from London, and he's younger than me, 20 something, and he is like, anyway, you have to look him up. It'd be hard to explain him, but he's really taking this like fusion of musical styles, and he's something of a prodigy, honestly. But his mom is to this day a classical violin teacher, and that's what he started with. And he's able to take everything that he's learned about music theory, but then Jacob Collier is becoming famous because he's doing things with music theory that no one has done really before. And anyway, I'm going to nerd out about that, but I'll stop. But um, it's all because he has this very firm foundation in
Mm-hmm.
what music can do that he feels free to take it somewhere else, but constantly rooted in what he's learned as the foundations, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That you don't have to invent something new to be trendy and cool, but to just play with, like you were saying, Grettelyn, just play with ingredients, play with different things, and add onions to your pizza. I always thought I hated onions, and then was like one of those, they brought me the wrong person's pizza, and instead of just plain sausage, it was sausage and onion. And now I really only order sausage and onion because
It's
it's
so good.
delicious,
Yeah.
It's delicious. Or different things, traveling around where it's rude to send food back or say you don't want to eat it, so you just eat it, and you learn that you like things you never thought you would.
Yeah.
But then there are things that are objective to taste, right? So mushrooms will always stink, no matter who you are or what you're doing. They will never be good. And I'm willing to die on that hill, to be honest with you. But I really like that connection between taste and conscience, because I just think that speaks to what we were saying earlier, that you put a big St. Michael the Archangel painting into a church, and people at first will say, we got rid of St. Michael's 60 years ago. Or they'll say, wow, whatever, that's not my style of art. But then over time you come around to it, and there's something in you that softens around it, and you really begin to change over time. It's beautiful. And I don't know, it's incredible. I've tried to fill my room here in the rectory, and I did this in my office at school. I just tried to fill it with art and color. And when I was on sabbatical, I started painting. And that's just been like a great sort of expression, to think, wow, that kind of thing can come out of me, even though I don't regard myself to be artistic at all, or didn't. But to just be able to see that, wow, not only am I capable of appreciating it, but over time you become almost capable of producing it in your own way, in your own style. That to me is a fascinating part of the journey that I did not expect.
Well, that's a very Chestertonian thing too, because I think he was a great proponent of having the hobbies, right? So it's not like you have to become Rembrandt. You just sort of do it in some ways for yourself. I mean, and if you get really good at it, great. But it's not. I'm sure by painting you understand paintings better. So even in that way, it's helpful. As a musician, I listen to symphonies different probably than people who don't know music. So it's just a sort of a way in, and opens up your brain in a different way and helps you appreciate things more. Yeah.
Totally. I agree 100% with that. And I've been calling myself Rembrandt. So I'm not going to become Rembrandt, but I'm going to be Father Rembrandt. I love Rembrandt. I have a big, I don't know, you probably can't see it. I have a huge painting of his in the back that still needs to be hung. Jeremiah lamenting the destruction of Jerusalem. A self-portrait in ministry, as I call it. But it's I don't know math, I guess, and I thought I was ordering like a 2x3 painting, and it ended up being like a 6-foot thing. But that mistake launched me into an appreciation of Rembrandt that I never thought I would have. I don't know. I think it's totally true. I don't know. You guys are really filling my mind today.
That's great.
The ability to appreciate other people's paintings and to see them differently. And I in a faculty meeting, I was railing against the quadratic formula one day because I'm terrible at math, and that's kind of a big joke with everyone. But one of the teachers, we have this kind of staircase at Chesterton that goes outside, and so you can get a good view of things from there. And she walked me over to there, and she said, she said, what is the quadratic formula used for measuring? And something about curves or something. And she said, the Romans invented straight lines, which of course is not true, but she was making a point. Like humans invented straight lines. God does not use straight lines. And so she pointed at these treetops off in the distance, and she said, are any of those treetops a straight line? No. And when you use the quadratic formula to measure the curves of the treetops, you're doing something to encounter creation. And she said, you see the quadratic formula as traumatic from your childhood, and I see it as a way of understanding what God was doing. You're like, how do you argue with that? I found that to be very unfair. But she's dead right. She's dead right. And as I've started kind of first tracing things and then trying to draw things kind of on my own, I am seeing the world as just a series of lines and curves, and everything is just lines and curves in different places.
Yeah,
And
shadow
when you
and light.
exactly, and when you, especially with watercolor, which is what I do, you layer things, just keep layering and layering and layering and layering, and something that looked very childish before, just by adding a little shade here, a little layer there, remembering to include the shadow, where's the sun, it comes to life in a way that like I didn't even know I was capable of generating life in that way. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Takes a certain patience. I do remember that too when I was learning to draw. Every picture I ever made looked really bad right before it was done.
Yeah.
It's like this weird thing that and I sort of learned that. And even as a kid, I remember thinking, okay, it looks bad now, but it's going to look good. Just keep going.
Yeah.
And they looked okay. It was, for a kid, but it was interesting. It was an interesting part of pushing through this kind of frustrating stage to where it started to look really quite good. Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't, I don't know if you've ever given up on them while you're in the process. I made a promise to myself that I'm not going to throw away art. I'm not going to say, oh, this is terrible, so I'm throwing it away. But I'm just going to I'm going to add it to the pile, and then come back and either say, yeah, that was really not that good, or wait a minute, whoa, And that happens to me a lot, actually, where you paint something or you draw something, and then this did not turn out how I wanted it to. So I just get up and you walk away, and then you come back and I think, who painted that? That's pretty good. Where did that come from? That's how I thought it would look. And then, giving yourself permission to make bad art, I think, is a huge part of making any art at all. I have a book. It's about academic writing from when I was in grad school, but the title is called Write No Matter What. And I think of that. Paint no matter what. Just paint. Just have an idea or don't have an idea and go for it,
I love that.
Yeah, well, very Chestertonian, right? A thing worth doing is worth doing badly. Therein lies the wisdom of that. I think that's a quotation that probably confuses some people, but it's precisely that the value in it is intrinsic, and to pursue it doesn't mean you're going to do it well all the time or perfectly, but don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good in that case, or even the enemy of the bad, because it's just worth doing. Yeah.
And don't let the good be the enemy of getting it done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or not getting it done. Grettelyn, I'm sure you have many unfinished drawings in a pile somewhere, and I have many unfinished. I have had the same painting halfway done on my desk here for 6 days. I have done nothing with it, and every day it looks at me and says, "Are you still alive? Come over here and finish me." But we'll see if we get to it or not. I don't know.
Well, this should be a habit that I cultivate for myself. It isn't one, but I have a similar experience with books, which is I collect them, and a lot of people ask that obvious question anytime you see somebody's home library. The first question people tend to ask is, "Have you read all of them?" And I say no, of course not. But I can't remember who quipped once. It was some famous person who had a famous home library, and the response was something along the lines of, "I don't know if I'll read all the books that I have, but I know I certainly shan't read any books that I don't have." So,
Amen.
yeah,
Amen.
That's totally fair. Yeah.
That's completely right. Yes.
yeah.
And I used to have a rule. Maybe you guys did too. I'm not going to buy any more books until I've read the ones I have.
No.
But that's not what books are for.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
not what books are for. I have my little mug, so many books, so little time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how
Well,
it feels sometimes.
and
Yeah.
as a parent, both me and my husband have had to learn, like, you just read when you get a chance, and sometimes it's a paragraph, and sometimes it's a chapter, and sometimes it's 3 chapters, and sometimes it's a sentence, and like that's
Yeah.
okay. And you just you don't make the goal just getting it done.
Yeah.
You enjoy the process, and then you go be with your kid or whatever you need to do. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Read and write no matter what.
no matter
Yeah.
what, I love
In
that.
the seminary, we used to talk about library envy,
Mhm.
and I'm just going to have the biggest library ever. And you guys are, but then now 2 parish moves, and like, I'm tired of schlepping books around. So, hopefully I don't have to move too many more times, but,
Yeah.
like, it's not worth having books just to have books.
Mm.
But on the other hand, I think it kind of is. You know what I mean? It just kind of is. I don't know. And
Yeah.
I am not a Kindle person. I
Mm.
can't do it. I want to write in the book, and
Mm.
I'm a dog ear guy, folding pages left and right. I think that's probably a sin to some people. But yeah, and then be able to say, like, when you look at a bookshelf. I remember I would look at the bookshelf in the seminary in my room, and I would always think, like, there's a saint in this bookshelf somewhere.
Mm.
Like, this, or there's a personality in this bookshelf somewhere.
Mm.
That who I am is largely because of my friends whose work is on this shelf.
Mm.
Um, and one of my, uh, I don't know where this came from, but I was glad that I did it for one of the senior classes at Chesterton for our last class of just one section, because now we have all the classes have 2 sections. But for the last class of one section, I talked to them about that Cicero quote, the man who has a library and a man who has a garden is a man who has everything.
Mm.
And so I kind of came at it from the perspective of, like, I would like to plant the first seed in your gardens of your libraries. And so
Mm.
I got books from my own library at home, and then I didn't give those away, of course, but I bought new ones. And I thought, like, okay, which book and which student really would fit together?
Mm.
And then I kind of presented them to the class, like, one by one, but first talking about the book and then kind of explaining why I thought it would go to that person. But
Oh.
from that perspective, that this is planting the first seed in your library, of your garden of wisdom or whatever.
Mm.
But because I really believe that. I really, really believe that Cicero quote to be true. During
Mm.
COVID, I started a garden at the
Mhm.
rectory, and cultivating both of those things, a library and a garden, like, that's what changed my life in many
Mm.
ways. So, I have no idea. Maybe that one book is still the only book those kids have on their library shelves, or maybe they threw it away. I don't know.
Yeah.
I certainly hope not, because it was very expensive. But
Mm.
I just am so grateful for when people think of me and they say, I have this book I think you would like.
Mm.
I love
Mhm.
that. I think
Yeah.
that to me is like, that's love, man.
Yeah.
You
Mm.
you know me well enough, and you've taken the time to listen to what I'm saying, and you have intellectually engaged with this other thing that you have connected in your mind and thought of me, and now out
Mm.
of generosity you're giving it to me. That's
Mm.
beautiful.
That is
It's
beautiful.
nerdy. It's nerdy, but it's beautiful.
Well, it's, one of my habits. Anytime I enter a place where somebody has books, especially a friend's house, I go and look at them, and I forget where I was. I was at a party that a friend was having and a bunch of bookshelves. And somebody said, "Oh, yeah, you're a real book lover," as I was looking at them. And I said, "Well, yeah, but also I love this person and I want to
Mm.
know them better. And there's really no better way sometimes. It's so, it almost feels like you're spying sometimes when you look through somebody's bookshelves because you learn so much about the person. And I made a deliberate choice when I was putting together my home library here uh, of, thinking about getting rid of things. And of course, I have all my wonderful first edition hardbacks and everything, and it was all starting to look very classy. And then I came
Hmm.
across these sort of very raggedy, well worn, beat up, multi red cheap paperback editions of frankly not very great books that I just voraciously consumed in like middle school and high school. And I was like, no, they have to stay on the shelves. They have to stay on the shelves because they're gonna let other people know about me, but also remind me, not to get too hoity-toity and high and mighty when I'm looking over my great collection, to come across Encyclopedia Brown sitting next to, it's kind of an important check on one's intellectual pretensions.
Yeah. And to recognize that probably some of the highest and mightiest things came from those books at a very important time of your life. My mom, she's an elementary school secretary, but she works part-time I'm from a very small town, and she works at the youth section of the public library in our town. And so for major moments in our lives, my brother and me, she would give us children's books to express different things, And so in the middle of Ratzinger and Steinbeck and, all these Bible commentaries and all this stuff, canon law books, I have Sir Ryan's Quest about a kid who sorts through pots and pans like he's King Arthur, which she gave me the day I left for seminary, or The Wump World or whatever these books were that I was reading. Children's books that I read as an adult, and it feels kind of funny, and people are like, why? What's that all about, Father? Isn't that kind of strange? And I say, well, those are the most meaningful books to me, actually, that I would rather keep much longer than any of these other books that I have.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, we are getting to time, but that was a lovely way to wrap up. Any last thoughts, Father?
Well, I think the truth is there. Just read no matter what and write no matter what, and just participate in, I think, the church's correct vision of renewing the mind, but renewing the taste as well, and to really recognize that there's a big wide world out there. And I got into a fight with one of the kids at school once that, he was arguing that every church in the world, including those in the middle of Africa, should look like the churches of Rome and be Baroque and whatever. And I said that would be profoundly disorienting on so many levels, and taste changes, but the truth endures, and what these places and books and messages, what they represent, they keep going, don't they? And we're happy when we think of them, and we're happy when we speak of them. So if you're someone who is really finding great life in reading these books and having these discussions, and you're feeling like, man, my family's not into it or my friends aren't into it, I just want to say, hang on until you go to college, or, you just look, because there are people out there who want to engage on these things with you, and don't let yourself become discouraged, but allow just this time of being like a little hermit of the great tradition to form who you are. And then, you won't be alone in it forever, even though it can feel that way.
Amen. And in the meantime, listen to our podcast, because
Amen.
We're here for it.
Amen.
Well, thank you so much, Father, for joining us. That was really a great discussion.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys. It's great to be with you. Joe, we did it first time. Great to be with you as well. See you again, hopefully. Likewise.
I hope so.
Yeah.
All right, you guys.
All right. Thank you all so much. And please remember to subscribe, hit the like button, share this episode with your friends. Because as we know, Chesterton is always better with friends. Thank you, and God bless.